Hi, Karolina.
How are
How are you?
you?
I'm great, thanks. I'm just going to give you a second. Are we good to go in the other rooms? Let's hope. Let's just hope the other rooms are ready to go. Yeah.
Should I share my screen now?
I will. I will sign out in a second. So welcome to this track. Well, I'm just going to hope the other tracks are all set up. Yeah. Are we good? I think. Wait. I'm going to wait just a second. Sorry, everybody. We're waiting just a second. I'll let you know when Ashanti's in. It's up.
I'm going to see if I can share my screen while we're waiting.
Yeah. Let's do that. And I'll just turn off my camera.
Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So I'm just gonna let you go. Welcome to stage, and I will back off and sign out. So good luck, best of luck, have fun, Karolina.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to talk about designing the future of working parenthood. And we're all working from home, so there's a chance that you will hear my kids in the background. They're 4 and 6, and they're currently arguing over Pokemon, which they know very little about, but they're obviously experts since they saw a couple shows. So hopefully there's not too much background noise. So just a little bit about me before I get started. I am the founder of a company called After Third, and we are currently a curated resource of experts and content for new and expecting parents, and we're working on developing a program for employers so that we can, I saw that message right there, yes, loud musical toys, they're great. So we are working on a program that employers can offer employees with the goal of actually better supporting working parents to get more gender equity within the workforce. Before doing this, my background is in business, specifically doing strategy for large companies, mostly in finance. And I have an MBA from the University of Michigan. I was at Oregon, and when my daughter was born, I was at a company called S&P Global. So this is a very personal topic for me as a working parent and as an entrepreneur working on solving this problem. So let's get into it. I'm actually going to say a really poor joke, but American English is my first language and my preferred language, so I'm going to go with mom instead of mum. For the purpose of this conversation, we also are going to talk within the context of traditional gender roles. So we're going to be talking about mothers specifically. We're going to be talking about parents as well, but it's really important that we talk about mothers. And then the final bit here is that I'm actually going to cover a lot. So there's a lot more to each of the things that I'm going to bring up here, and we can have a conversation about them. But we're actually going to go through a lot of information, so it's going to be pretty fast. Okay, let's get started. So I saw this quote recently in the Atlantic, and I position that mothers are in, working mothers. So the ideal worker is an employee who's completely devoted to their job. They work long hours, they rely on someone else to take care of their family. They stay late in the office. When they're not there, they're still checking email. They rarely take time off, and they get rewarded for it. The good mother is the opposite. She's completely devoted to her family. She prioritizes caring for children over paid work. She's emotionally absorbed by the needs of her children, so she's not as reliable at work, and she gets dinged for it. And if you think about this, perceptions do matter, roles do matter. And this is basically what society is telling working mothers that they have to do. They have to be completely perfect in two roles that are defined in such a way that they can never actually work together. This is a little bit extreme. I don't think all of us that are working parents feel this kind of pressure all the time, but it's definitely there for many of us, and it definitely comes up repeatedly. So I'll assume most of you on here are working parents, but for those of you that aren't, why should we talk about working parents? So whether you're a working parent or not, Parents with dependent children are about 1/3 of the workforce, give or take. This is about the split within the US and the UK. So most companies will have a substantial number of parents with dependent children in their labor force. So it's really important to be talking about parents. And then when we look at mothers, 3 out of 4 mothers work. So give or take a couple percentage points here as well. This number is fairly consistent across the US and the UK. This number probably will be a little lower once we come out of COVID. But the point here is we all know that the majority of fathers work, but the majority of mothers work as well. So we need to talk about both, and we need to focus on mothers. But before we get into why mothers, I think for many of us who are working parents, we know what our personal experiences are. We know what the narrative is for us. We know what the narrative is for our friends. But I think it's really important to look at the story as a whole, because while we each have our own unique experiences, we need to be able to take ourselves out of our own experiences and see what the whole is doing and how the whole is navigating the experience to understand the scale of the problem and to start getting into what the potential answers are. So 72% of working fathers said that they were physically and emotionally burned out. This was a study done by a company called Talking Talents, and they also interviewed the peers who were not parents, and they found that the rate of burnout was significantly lower among the non-fathers. Generally speaking, burnout is a problem for companies in general, but it is much higher for working parents. And I can speak to this personally. So I was working in corporate, I had 2 children, and I started a company all at the same time. And it was impossible. It was impossible because no one should be doing all 3 of those things at once. But I burned out. It was impossible, yet everyone around what I was doing, because I think we all think of ourselves as super moms and super dads, but that narrative does not serve us. So the burnout is a big problem, and it impacts productivity. Both parents experience that, but the burden on mothers is higher. So we're going to talk about the UK and the US. The stats on the left are UK. The stats on the right are US. Moms worked 25 hours and spent 14 hours on childcare in 2016. This is up from 9 and 10 hours in 1965 in the US. So not only are mothers working more, which we know, but they're actually taking on more childcare. 54% of parents in households where both parents are employed full-time say mothers do more to manage their children's schedules and activities. This comparable statistics for fathers is 6%. And if is on the left here, 56% of working moms and 50% of working dads say it's very or somewhat difficult to balance work and life responsibilities. There's a positive story here, which is that it does get easier as the children get older. So it does get better. It's especially hard in the beginning, and it does get better. 28% of mothers in the UK with a child under 14 said that they reduced their working hours because of childcare. And for fathers, again, this was only 5%. So it's quite a big difference. So why do we need to talk about working moms? Specifically, why not just talk about parents? We need to talk about working mothers because the impact to them is also financial. It's not just about having a lot to take care of. It's the fact that they will live in their. We at Afterthird have done a lot of interviews and a lot of surveys because, you know, we're parents, and for us, this is very personal. But we also wanted to make sure that what we're working on isn't just colored by our own experiences. So we heard a lot of things. One of the quotes that we have from someone who was high up at a large bank was, women see their performance ratings go down when they take parental leave. This isn't the only anecdote we got like this. We actually heard this many times. And then another quote that we got was, I knew when deciding to get pregnant that my promotion to partner would be delayed 1 to 2 years as a result. So this is someone who was on the partner track and actually knew the trade-off up front and made that decision to have a child and basically take that penalty. So we've got about 100 years before we reach gender equity at our current rate of progress. In the US today, women make 81 cents to the male dollar. In the UK, 8 out of 10 women work for an employer who pays men more. And McKinsey did a study where they found that 43% of women take a career break and almost half do it for family reasons. This number is really important because it's one of the reasons you see women's careers being impacted, is that need to slow down or that need to take a break. So why are we talking about this, and what does motherhood have to do with the gender pay gap and with women in the workforce? So there was this New York Times article, and what they did was they looked at some studies that were done by economists. And those studies basically said that the gender pay gap is because of motherhood. I emailed one of those economists and I had read her paper, but essentially she boiled it down to 2 things. Mothers still take on more of the work at home. That's one of the problems that we have. And the other piece is that flexibility at work is financially penalized by employers. So the story goes like this. Generally today, you see most couples, most partners, again, traditional gender constructs, so male and female, they tend to split the work. When they have children, they don't necessarily plan ahead or talk about it, and they tend to default to what they've seen their parents do. Maybe not as much in those traditional gender constructs, but they definitely move from a more equal division of home to one that's much more heavily on the mother. And then as a result, the working mother is more likely to ask for flexibility, still working the same amount, just asking to work more flexible hours, perhaps ask for part-time or take a career break. And all of these things are financially penalized by employers. So that's why motherhood matters. That's why we need to look at working parents and better support working mothers if we want gender equity in the workforce. And this is actually becoming starkly obvious with the pandemic. So I'm sure all of you have seen, there's been a lot of different memes, there's a lot of coverage. You've seen the news articles about women leaving the workforce, about, academics, female academics publishing less papers. You've seen things like this, which are funny, but also sadly true. This was one that went quite viral. So can't wait to homeschool my kids while working from home, while trying to eat healthy, while avoiding the coronavirus, while trying to keep sane, while keeping up with the news, while getting 5 minutes to myself, while cleaning the house, while writing a book, while being a mom. This is impossible. There's no version of reality where this is possible. So it's a little different in the UK and the US. In the UK, children are back at school. And in the US, a lot of parents are still dealing with having to do all these things all at once. So we've seen most of this work has fallen on working mothers because that's the default. That's what people are used to. So how are they doing? Not great. According to a study done by Lean In and McKinsey & Company, 1 in 4 women are considering cutting back hours or otherwise scaling back of the pandemic and its fallout. So I think in the UK, you would have sort of experienced a lot of the US, again, because of the difference in policies there. So in the US, 865,000 women left the workforce in September, which is a huge number. And generally speaking, people think that a lot of this is actually driven by working mothers having to take on all the extra work that's been brought into the house. And when I saw this number, I felt really sad, because it's not like it's one thing if as a working parent you make the decision that you are going to focus on a certain aspect of your life and not your career, but these are not decisions that are planned. These are decisions that happen because there are no other choices. The good news is that we can solve this problem, not just rebounding from the pandemic once it's done, but also the lack of support that working mothers face in general and the penalty that they face. If you're someone who follows this, you've probably seen a lot of the pieces of how this actually comes together, but we have the answers. It's complicated, but we have the answers. So the first thing we need to do is wipe out the motherhood penalty. And to wipe out the motherhood penalty, the answer is to focus on fathers. So what I mean by focusing on fathers is that we actually have to treat them as equal in parenthood. So right now, women are seen as the defaults in a family, the default parents, and they're treated by society as the default parents. They're also seen by employers as the default parent. So we need to make sure that we see fathers and mothers as equal parents, and essentially really all parents as equal parents. So fathers need to take on their share of the work at home. Flexibility needs to exist for all. There are plenty of people who aren't parents who want flexibility. Flexibility needs to be seen as being the default and not a concession. And then we also have to take measures to proactively mitigate bias, because bias is definitely part of this, and we'll get into this a little bit more. So why do we need to make sure that fathers are seen as equal parents? Part of this is because if you're an employer, there's a cost associated with mothers. So we need to distribute the short-term cost of parenthood. We need to normalize shared leave and shared parenting. If both men and women, both mothers and fathers, are seen equally as taking on the burden of parenthood and sharing that cost equally, then mothers or women of childbearing age are not going to be seen as a higher cost to employers. And then, of course, there is a cost that's associated with being a birth mother. So there is a cost to pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum, and we need to distribute that across society, again, so that mothers aren't penalized for being the ones that have to give parenthood. And then the key here is work-life integration for everyone. So flexibility should be the norm, not a concession. Policies need to be supportive of work-life integration. And we need to have intentional bias mitigation and processes. So work-life integration is not work-life balance. Work-life balance is this concept that, it's a trade-off between the two at all times, and you have to get them kind of equal. Work-life integration is about being able to invest in the aspects of your life that are important to you, sort of over the mid and long run, so that you are putting the time in a way that's meaningful for you. And the good news is that the future of work more broadly is going to help us where we're supposedly going. More flexibility, smarter work, more inclusive, more automated, and culture focused. These are all trends, if this comes to fruition, that will support not just all employees, but especially working parents. And so here are the things, if you're an employer or if you work, for a company talking about this, here are things employers can do. They can offer parental leave to both parents and normalize parents taking it. They can eliminate the presenteeism premium. They can acknowledge and support the physical aspects of pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. And in the UK, we do this pretty well, although it's not as comprehensive as everyone would like. The US still has a ways to go here. 25% of women go back to work 2 weeks after having a child in the US. And then support parents as they reintegrate into the workforce, because this is where you figure out how to piece it all together and make it work. So it's a critical drop-off point for working mothers. And then, of course, design your processes and systems to mitigate bias. So the way you look at processes and systems to mitigate bias against working parents, it's the same way that you're going to look at it to mitigate bias against women, to mitigate bias against minorities and any other groups. And then I know that we've covered a lot, but what we can do to recover from the pandemic in the last minute or so, it's important. So keep mothers in the workforce. Offer childcare support, for example, in the US where it's a challenge. And as managers, teach your managers and encourage them to manage compassionately. This is temporary, and we're all in it together. And then for the mothers that have left the workforce, the working mothers, basically we just need return to work programs that don't penalize them for that break. Again, it's a problem that we can solve. So that's the good news. It's a big problem, but we can fix it. And I loved having the time to talk to you all about this. I know it's a lot. So you can find us at Afterthird on Instagram. You can email us at hello@afterthird, or you can email me at Karolina@afterthird.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you all about this. So just feel free to reach out to me. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Karolina. I was actually going to say, we've got a couple minutes. If anybody wants to ask questions in the chat, are there any questions? Or Karolina, do you want to accept questions? Great. Anybody want to ask questions?
Yes, of course. I guess, how many of you are working parents in the chat? Yes. And how many of you have struggled during this time? And just out of curiosity, how many of you were struggling before we even got to the pandemic? Yeah. And I think most of us on here are women. Yes, but not as badly. I think that's how most of us feel. And it does get better with time. It's especially hard in the beginning. And the pandemic just made it clear how unsustainable everything is. Oh, I love this comment. Overachieving expectations for both motherhood and employee. Yes. So just a little more background. I did strategy for companies, looking at how you actually make organizations function. And in my last role, I ran a team of over 40 people, and a lot of them were parents. And I have to say that I've been on both sides of, supervising working parents and being a working parent. And if we just actually look at work-life integration and look at flexible work in a different way, as well as put the right support structures in place, it doesn't have to be as hard as it is today. Yes, I love it. Pandemic was like juggling 10
picking mine up
balls
at 3:15. And I also just want to put some context, in the States, and I don't know, I think the States might be unique, but so many of you, for American viewers on this TV show, your kids are still doing remote learning. And I think that like in the UK, we're so lucky that our kids are back at school. Lucky by whatever that means. It's still anxiety inducing, but I think in the States, everybody is juggling both all the time. And so well done to all of you for handling that.
And it'll pass. I think we have to remember it's hard. It'll pass. And I think we're at time. There was a question around productivity, but you can email me because I have an answer to that question as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Karolina. I really enjoyed that. And I think you're going to share some of the content with us. So stay tuned for that. And we will send it out after the conference to everybody because it was jammed packed full of great statistics. So thank you so much, Karolina. And I will go back to the big room.